Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
And that's a go for what's a go on?
So get up and unite for your team. Give the best we've got. It's how we
every part, every preach, every part, every deal, every wicked, every soul. And the heart and soul and passion, and the culture, Caribbean flows. When people come out all nation, with the team in a unification. When the stadium ram beach at the grandstand, and the meaning of beautification.
It's how we play. It's how we play.
When the stadium ram beach at the grandstand, and the meaning of beautification.
It's how we play.
Baby burgers, 3 for the money, brand new thing. Whole a box of baby burgers, roll up a Burger King, baby burgers. Wow, the taste, good time, man. BK Baby Burgers is.
Thanks for joining us for CVM News at Noon. It's Monday, the last day of August 2026. I'm Amoy Harriet, and thank you for joining us. Up first this afternoon, the water level at the Hermitage Dam has risen by just over 3%. As of Sunday, August 30, the National Water Commission, NWC, said the storage level at the Hermitage Dam stood at 34.3%. That's up from 31% recorded last Thursday, August 27. However, the water level at Mona Reservoir continues to decline. The latest assessment at the weekend showed that mark at 43.1%, down from 45.2% recorded last Thursday. Now, when contacted, Corporate Public Relations Manager at the NWC, Delano Williams, told our newsroom that despite the improvement, the current water restrictions remain in place. Detectives in Westmoreland are probing the circumstances surrounding the death of a woman. The deceased has been identified as 59-year-old Cheryl Grant, otherwise called Christine, of Macney Land in the parish. Reports are that shortly after 5:30 a.m. on Sunday, Grant was sweeping her yard when she was ambushed and shot multiple times by armed men in or traveling in a motor car. The suspects escaped and residents in the community stumbled upon Grant's body, which was lying in a pool of blood in the yard. The police were called, and upon their arrival, the scene was processed and the body removed. In the meantime, investigators said they have not found a motive for the killing, but are presently pursuing several strong leads. Meanwhile, a 37-year-old man is said to have been mentally challenged, or who is said to have been mentally challenged, was reportedly taken, or has reportedly taken his own life at his home in Seaford Town, Westmoreland last Friday. The deceased has been identified as Jermaine Burchell, otherwise called Tarvey. It has been reported that Burchell was living in a makeshift tent in his yard at Seaford Town, where he was last seen alive inside shortly after 11 p.m. last Thursday. However, around 7 o'clock Friday morning, a neighbor discovered Burchell hanging from the branch of a breadfruit tree with a piece of rope around his neck. The police were called, and upon arrival, Burchell's body was cut down and transported to the morgue for post-mortem examination. Investigations are ongoing. Now, police in Manchester are probing the fatal shooting of two men in separate incidents in the parish Monday morning. The victims have been identified as Donald Anderson, a resident of Asia, and a man known as Tippy, a resident of Hearties. In the first incident, reports are that the residents in Asia heard loud explosions early Monday morning and later found Anderson dead at his home with what appeared to be gunshot wounds. The second victim, Tippy, was shot and killed in the Hearties community. Now, this brings to 25 the number of people who have been killed in Manchester since the start of the year, compared to 19 murders for the corresponding period last year. And it's time now for a break, but stay with us. More news on the other side.
And get creative with your floors, walls, and all the spaces in between. Our knowledgeable sales consultants are happy to help create your beautiful finish with the latest designs in first quality porcelain, wood look, vinyl, mosaics, natural stones, and countertops. At Creative, you will get every tile you need for your residential or commercial projects. Creative Building Finishes, your one-stop shop for everything tiles. Visit our showroom at 5 Red Hills Road or call 876-929-5553. Get tiles, get creative.
Hi, I am Candy Pang.
Watagwan.
Watagwan.
Datagwan pa.
Watagwan. Watagwan.
Watagwan. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m., 1:30 p.m., and 10 p.m. on CVM TV.
Datagwan pa Watagwan.
Welcome back to CVM News. At noon, we are continuing the news. Jamaica's worsening water shortage is now becoming a financial headache for small businesses. The Small Business Association of Jamaica says operators are spending thousands of dollars on private water supplies, while others are being forced to temporarily shut down. We go now to Kevin Black for the details.
Prolonged drought is putting added pressure on small businesses, with some operators now having to pay for private water supply to keep their doors open. President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, Garnet Reed, says hairdressers, barbers, operators of car wash companies and restaurants are among those being hardest hit by the shortage.
The most affected are the hairdressers, the barber, the car wash, and the restaurant. Some restaurant has to be closed. We get called as well as St. Anne's, Manchester, that some days they have to be closed up. There's no water. They ask their private supplier to bring the water. They don't bring on time. They can't open. And then schools also will be opening. And then that also could be an impact on the school reopening. Of course, you know, you're going to have the little lady that sell at the school gate and so on and so forth. So it's going to have a great impact on the small business operator island-wide.
He warns that if the drought continues to impact the nation, it would result in businesses cutting hours or even reducing their workforce.
I have a member who she do lotion, she do ketchup, and so on. And she had to close a couple of days because there was no water to produce our goods. And so on, and so it's going to cause some problems, and therefore we have to fix it. We have to fix these problems as quickly as possible.
Reid says the support is critical as businesses prepare for the Christmas season, which is an important period for small business operators.
We cannot afford that small business to close. We're just coming out of Hurricane Melissa, another crisis after crisis. We need to find a way to fix it. So government have to find funds to help these people. For example, you used to pay your water bill for $10,000. Chuck the water for the $10,000 and give them a rebate so that they can pay their bills, so that they can have water to run their businesses.
Kevin Black reporting for CVM News.
Now, the government is moving to clear outstanding claims under its roofs program 10 months after Hurricane Melissa. Labour Minister Pernod Charles Jr. says more than 118,000 assessments have been done, with billions of dollars dispersed so far. Let's go back now to Kevin Black for the details.
Nearly a year after Hurricane Melissa, the government says it has dispersed close to $11 billion in support to families affected by the hurricane. But thousands of claims under the roofs program are still being verified, with Minister of Labour and Social Security, Pernod Charles Jr., saying the process has uncovered duplicate applications and other discrepancies.
We're far beyond 50% in terms of where we are in terms of verification and understanding the process. The reality we face is this. You have individuals trying to manipulate the situation. You have individuals that will make a claim in Trelawney and one in St. Thomas. So we have to scour through to make sure that you don't have one individual that is being given 2 grants.
He says some duplications are intentional, while others result from misunderstandings during the assessment process.
So I had someone very loud, quarreling. I mean, you would want to immediately give this person support because of how loud, bold, and direct they were about the fact that they needed the support now. When we checked the system, their spouse had received a grant already, and their son was about to receive a grant until we investigated and found that the son also lived in the same house and he was coming for another grant. So not until I indicated that we are using a digitized process that is going to pick it up, and that's the reason why their grants were delayed, because the system that we're using picked up the multiple applications for one home.
Minister Charles Jr. says the government hopes to resolve the remaining cases over the next few months.
Our hope is that we will be able to work with the remaining potential beneficiaries to rectify their issues as quickly as possible within the next few months. But the reality is that there are many variables that are not in our control. A lot has to do with, can we identify the persons? A lot has to do with how quickly do we get the information from families and members of the households to help them to rectify the situation. And so it requires us to be on the ground, consistent, constant communication and collaboration.
Kevin Black reporting for CVM News.
Now, a dispute over a phone charger has left one man dead in St. Mary. Now, this is the latest in a string of deadly confrontations that appear to begin over seemingly minor issues. Just weeks ago, a St. Catherine man was killed after an alleged dispute over the volume of a television during a World Cup match. So, why are these everyday disagreements escalating into deadly violence? That's the conversation we're having today for our live interview. And I'm joined now by Georgia Rose, who is senior clinical psychologist in the Western region. Top of the afternoon to you, Miss Rose.
Thank you so much for having me.
A phone charger and a television volume. These, to me and to probably a lot of other people, would seem like minor disputes, minor situations. In other words, that serious. Why are we seeing these instances or these cases turning into violent incidents, deadly sometimes incidents? What's happening from your perspective as a psychologist?
So you are accurate. They are minor issues that should not escalate to the level that leads to violence and ultimately the loss of life. What we've come to understand is that anger, frustration, disappointment, these are normal emotions, and we want to restate that for the public. What becomes concerning or troubling is the method in which we choose to express our feelings of displeasure or disquiet. We find when the population gets to a place where they're feeling very overwhelmed, so very often it's never really the cell phone or the volume on the television. It's generally a boiling point that an individual has come to or approached for a multiplicity of reasons. You know, a person might have impaired coping strategies, so they don't do well under periods of stress. Some individuals experience stress a lot more quickly or easily than others. So their tipping point is very minute. Little things throw them over the edge. So an incapacity to manage their stress levels and their discomfort in a healthy and adaptive way. Other individuals might be very overwhelmed. Their resources might be very low. You know, they might feel as if they don't have any support. They might feel as if, you know, they can't take it anymore. And this is the straw that broke the camel's back. So when we stop and we reflect on it, it's never just that simple issue of a television volume or a match dispute or a cell phone charger. You know, there are always other things that are beneath the surface that are bubbling up in a very negative or adverse way.
So talk to me or walk me through what happens psychologically when someone reaches this point where they're at their boiling point, as you mentioned, or they're so angry. What happens in their minds that would cause them to not for even a second think about the consequences? Walk me through that.
Well, the processing loop that their thoughts and their emotions are moving through has become, you know, it's malfunctioning, for want of a better term. So there are fail-safes that should be in place to say, let me walk away, let me step back, let me take a break. Those things are not activated. They are not chipping in, you know, they are not sounding the alarm that things are escalating and getting to a deadly place. And unfortunately, we do live in a space and a society that sometimes we goad people on in moments of conflict. So instead of engaging in de-escalation and tactics or techniques, you know, we boost people up, you know, we spur them on, we encourage them, you know, I wouldn't take that, me would have vexed too. And what we often don't recognize and see is that the emotions are getting more and more intense. So the decision making is very impaired. And that individual or those individuals within that moment are not able to look to the long-term consequences. It is an onslaught. You know, the stress hormones are high. The reasoning is impaired, and their capacity to self-regulate and de-escalate on their own is not working. And if individuals generally do not practice, you know, techniques that allow them to manage their displeasure or their conflict in a healthy way, when they're in a crisis situation, and the crisis could be the cell phone charger incident, because, you know, it's heightened for whatever reason, then they are going to struggle, they are going to have challenges, and they are at risk of making decisions that are going to have very negative long-term consequences. When you think about it, we've had lots of interventions from a administrative government standpoint. You know, we used to have peace and love in schools as PALS, encouraging our children to engage in baseline, you know, conflict resolution. We have the Dispute Resolution Foundation. We have the Peace Management Initiative. So there are lots of initiatives and organizations that exist in our society. Unfortunately, sometimes these spaces or these programs are preaching to individuals who already practice that level of healthy conflict management. Those individuals that we really need to reach and support and engage, we often don't get to interact with them. The way we manage conflict has a lot to do with our environment, our upbringing, or philosophies of life, or emotional context. And, you know, check me on a day when I'm having a great day and you hit my car, I might be able to smile and say, you okay? But what if it's a day when all the blocks seem to be tumbling down? My empathy and my capacity to reason it out might not be the same, because we have to remember that people are humans, right? We're fallible by nature. We're going to make mistakes. So I think we also have to grasp that in certain spaces, individuals are very overwhelmed by the demands of life. And when you take the demands of life with limited resources, poor social support, and an internal system that was already flawed, it's a recipe for disaster.
You mentioned a while ago, sorry, Ms. Rose, you mentioned a while ago hitting a car, and that brought me back to a report, I believe it was a few months ago, where in a road rage incident, a driver ended up pulling his licensed firearm weapon, or his licensed firearm. And this isn't the first such incident I've heard about in at least the past 2 years. Do you think, based on the work you've been doing over the last several years and the people you've come in contact with, do you think as a people, as a country, as Jamaicans, we've gotten too comfortable with resorting to violence as a means of resolving conflict?
That's an excellent question. What I think is that our capacities to cope have diminished. And I think that has, multiple factors that are contributing to that. One, our social support is not what it used to be. We're not very community-based and as harmonious as we used to be as a society.